My face is here again. Apologies. We had a bit of an issue, so we had to hold on to that conversation. We'll bring it to you subsequently as soon as we're able to re-establish connection. Most likely not today. But I guess that gives us more time to get on with the second half of this conversation. We're shifting focus to something else that is also endemic, and that's kidnappings for ransom. What began decades ago as sporadic abductions have now evolved into a large-scale conflict economy that fuels insurgency, empowers armed groups, and terrorizes local populations. In the Sahel, spanning Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and parts of Nigeria, kidnappings have become a lucrative enterprise for criminal networks, jihadist militants, and bandits. This kidnapping industry, as some have tagged it, is now deeply embedded in the region's insecurity, financing armed groups and challenging efforts by states to assert authority. Now, with rising humanitarian needs, displacement, and eroding governance, many fear the trend will worsen unless bold solutions are found. Let's examine the issues with our guests. We have Wing Commander, retired, Musa Salmanu. He's also a security expert. Also joining us a little later will be Captain Dr. Luqman Gidado, retired, also a security expert. Musa, thank you very much for joining us. Let's establish a little bit of a basis for the conversation. How does kidnapping for ransom in the Sahel, how has it evolved from, we used to hear isolated instances to now what we seem, people in your field are describing it as a persistent regional crisis?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And just like you have alluded, kidnapping has become something that is, in fact, manifesting as the most lucrative aspect of the insecurity that we are suffering from in the Sahel region and down to some parts of Nigeria. Before, it used to go along with the other aspects, that's in terms of maybe pillaging villages and ransacking and kind of a scorched earth policy where and many other aspects or components of that fuel the economy or the shadow economy of this war economies. But it has stood out as the most lucrative of recent. And because it's simple, it has to do with humans. Instead of stealing or rampaging anything that belongs to the human, you take the human. And because of that issue, everything will be done to rescue or to pay ransom and so on and so on. So it has become a kind of a cycle whereby there's a kidnap, a ransom is being paid, the ransom is used to buy more arms, and there are more kidnappings because they expect that more ransom will be paid. And once there are more ransoms that are paid, then the economy continues. More arms are bought and so on and so forth. So you find out that even the groups are running after one another in terms of who kidnaps more, because it means who gets more. The United Nations Security Council report indicates that between 2015 and 2025, about $400 million was spent in ransom. If you put that and so many other figures that are being put out across this region, you find out that it's a very lucrative business that has been able to fuel the crisis that is happening there.
Luqman Gidado joining us from our Abuja studio. If you can hear me, can you kindly acknowledge? Good evening. Okay, great. I'm not sure if you heard the responses from Musa, but I'll just go along and ask from your experience to talk to us how responses over the years has sort of emboldened this crisis that we now have? And what are the implications? Paint us a picture in that regard of what we're looking at if nothing changes.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you look at the responses of the government across the Sahel region, using Mali as a case study, because Mali have been witnessing surge of kidnapping, which is the larger security dynamics across the Sahel. And the government of Mali have carried out several military operations, but with very, very insignificant results. And the reason is not far-fetched. The governments in the countries that are experiencing this surge of kidnapping and other criminal activities do not possess the capacity to actually deter this militant group from carrying out their heinous crime against humanity. They don't have the capacity. They need both regional and international cooperation and support to be able to effectively curb the surge of kidnapping. And the larger implication for this is premised on the fact that the recent withdrawal of the countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger from ECOWAS to form the alliance of Sahel states have actually reduced coordination of intelligence and security framework. Before now, when they were in the ECOWAS, there were significant and little improvement. But now that they have drifted away from ECOWAS, that has further degenerated the effort of ECOWAS to actually coordinate intelligence gathering across border and security efforts across the Sahel region. So I would say that to actually have an improved security of lives and property in the Sahel region, there is need for ECOWAS to actually put aside political agreements and collaborate and foster synergy with the likes of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, that have formed the Association of Alliance of Sahel States, because this is about humanity. They need to foster synergy to actually come together to foster intelligence gathering across the Sahel region, foster security efforts in a more coordinated way. If that is done, I strongly believe that it will go a long way towards curbing the menace of kidnapping across the Sahel region.
Much, Luqman. Well, as we were speaking, I was busy thinking that would be a rather tall order at the moment, because we know politics and the intricacies of internal democracies will continue to complicate efforts to fight insecurity. But we need to do that, particularly in the instance we're talking about, because at some point, kidnapping was seen as something that was targeting mostly foreigners who come into Africa to maybe do humanitarian work or experts on some areas. But now, it seems that it is primarily locals that are being targeted for this ransom. To what extent has this kidnapping become an industry that fuels not just insurgencies, but criminal networks? The question is for you, Musa, please.
So you have to understand kidnapping as a method or as a system of one criminal act, yes, then also as a component of the conflict, that as a means of conflict. Now, the fact that with kidnapping, the whole idea of either banditry or the kind of warfare that is being executed by this is fear, is terror. So kidnapping comes as a means of terror to terrorize the population, to ensure that they don't feel secured and they feel that the government is not doing enough. It itself is a manifestation of the fact that there is a collapse in the stateness of the state, that the state is incapable of protecting its first territory and its population, and therefore people can go about doing all sort of those acts on the population. So it's a form of telling the population that the state is incapable of protecting them. That's in one aspect. So psychologically, it has that effect. Then in terms of the economy, when, like I said earlier on, when you kidnap, let's say cattle rustling, if before it used to be issue of cattle rustling, it used to be issue of taxing people and so on and so forth. But they found out that it pays even more to kidnap. When they kidnap the people, because it's dealing with people, it's less difficult to deal with because people are sensible, for example, and there is pain and so on and so forth. And there's that emotional or trauma that when people know that their loved ones are in the hands of this terror. So like they say, fear is that thing that brings out the money from people. So there's that fear, there's the trauma and so on. So they have capitalized on that, knowing that whenever there is kidnap, they are going to get money out of it. Ransom is going to be paid. And therefore, as the foreigners have reduced in number, then they move up to the locals, terrorizing them and kidnapping them and demanding for ransom with little or no repercussion. And once they do that, and it shows that it yields results, so it becomes an industry as it is now, and with no visible sign of the state being able to kind of push back or to ensure that those areas that are most vulnerable, where people are exposed, are protected. So it means that people are left to their own devices, and these people, the more money they get, the more weapons they're able to buy, thereby reinforcing their ability to kidnap in scale. Because we have started seeing kidnappings in scale, and the numbers increase by the day.
Quite a horrible picture that's unfolding as a result of this. I know I said it's a tall order when we're looking for regional assistance, Luqman, but then you think about the fact that beyond politics, even in conflict, people still have conversations, and there are some efforts at dialogue. So it's on that premise that I'm going to ask what role you see for ECOWAS, AU, and the likes play in coordinating maybe a regional response to help with the efforts to curb kidnapping in violent groups. Luqman, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start from the angle of the African Union. Within the African continent, the African Union serves as the larger umbrella under which other regional organizations spring from. So the African Union can actually play the leadership role of making sure it mediates between the ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel states. If the African Union can actually lead the center stage in making sure that they form a dialogue to be able to actually see how they can synergize in fostering information and intelligence sharing across the border, I think that would be a good step in the right direction. Also, the ECOWAS standby force needs to be strengthened in terms of proper funding to actually be able to carry out the assigned tasks of making sure there is improvement in the lives and property of people across the Sahel region. So to the individual states, the reason why this menace of kidnapping...
let me interject there, Luqman. The strong regional standby force, is it already in existence and empowered, or it is more of a proposal for about 5,000 strong?
By all data and statistics available, the ECOWAS standby force is already in existence, and member states just need to galvanize all available resources to make it more operational. And that is what I'm actually advocating for, that there is more beyond rhetorics. This ECOWAS standby force should actually be made operational in terms of funding and other logistics to be able to carry out the mandate for which it was set up.
Okay.
For the individual states that are actually bearing the brunt of kidnapping and other insecurity issues across the Sahel, what these criminal elements are actually capitalizing on is premised on the fact that there is weak governance, especially within the local and rural communities. So these terrorist groups are taking advantage of this to recruit people. There is endemic poverty in the Sahel region. So there is need for government to enhance the community framework that is grossly lacking and insufficient across the Sahel region. If this is done across the individual states that comprise of the Sahel region, that will also be a good step towards curbing the menace of kidnapping and other criminal activities. I stated earlier that Mali, as a case in point, have set up many military operations towards curbing this surge of kidnapping, but it has yielded a very, very little and insignificant result. That's to tell you that military option alone cannot actually solve this problem. There is need for the governments of these countries to actually enhance the community framework, improve lives and property, improve the standard of living of the people at the rural area.
All right, let's come back to you, Musa. I don't know if you could just talk to us a bit more, because I'm sure a lot of persons might not be aware of this regional standby force. What can you tell us about it, their potential, if maximized?
The issue of the ECOWAS standby force is something that started some decades back, I think about 2007 or thereabout. And there has been a lot of efforts to ensure that, so the whole concept is that the regional arrangements, as they call them, should be able to come up with forces that will be on standby basis, so that when problems happen, they are going to be able to deploy them as quick as possible before any maybe global arrangement or global initiative takes place. We've seen, and it came from the idea of when Liberia happened and Sierra Leone and so on, that ECOMOG was able, because it's a regional concern, it was within the region that was able to immediately mobilize and to deploy. So the thinking is that if we have those regional arrangements, that's in West Africa, in East Africa, and so on, it's then be easier for them to intervene, because they are the same people. For example, it's easier to intervene when it is the same people, the same issues, and so on and so forth, and then bringing other people from other parts of the world or from other parts of the continent. So that was the whole idea of the ECOWAS standby force, and where countries made pledges and they were to contribute so that that regional force is there and can be able to respond. However, there has been various levels of success in terms of operationalization, and of relate the issue of the export, or will I say the withdrawal of Niger, Mali, and from ECOWAS, then that's the Sahel state, further weaken what was already weak. And therefore, we're having a situation whereby we have them structure on paper. To a large extent, they're there, but in terms of functionality, is very limited. And therefore, it becomes difficult for them to deploy. We could see that part of it, for example, the multinational joint task force is supposed to have a kind of be the nucleus or be some kind of component of that could easily metamorphose or to add to the strength of that regional standby force. So In terms of operationalization, it's very limited. In terms of what they can do in this, is also very limited. Then come in the layer of the issues of politics and diplomacy that is happening within the ECOWAS region, where you have countries for one reason or the other are saying that they have left the region or the regional bloc. And there, if you look at those countries that are mostly or that are most affected, they have a very huge land size, and the population is relatively low. So you have very huge expanse of land that are territory that are inhabited or are not having government presence. So to get this, you have to, we must go beyond either diplomacy or through diplomacy and forget the politics of it and know that it helps everyone to come together to approach this situation as a collective responsibility. Because if that is not done, as we have seen, these countries individually lack the capacity to do that. And even as a bloc, they are struggling. So it is to the benefit or for the help of each of these members of these countries to go beyond what situation it is today and look at the interests of this region and come together to solve this problem. Now, in terms of capacity,
let me interject again. When you say coming together, it's not, sometimes it seems arrogant to say common sense is not actually as common as we all claim. We know what is the right thing to do. What is stopping our leaders from finding a middle ground at the regional and state level to begin to work better to undermine this kidnapping for ransom network? At least we can start from there. If we start from there, then we can talk about the bigger challenge of terrorism.
Well, you know, it's the lack of, I call it coordination. And in this case, you ask who is to coordinate who. So it's a kind of people thinking differently. Instead of, if you say locally, so let's look at even regional, let's say in the north, kind of having a northwest or a northeast strategy that aligns with one another and say that this is a common problem, and therefore we should look at it collectively as a region, instead of each state adopting a policy or adopting strategies that might be very limited, might work for a short time, but is not capable of ensuring that the situation is looked at holistically. So we have not been able to look at this situation holistically and agree, because there are a lot of conferences, a lot of talking about coming together and looking at it. But we have failed to, in action, adopt a kind of synergistic approach towards this, where everybody is doing their own bit. So you find out that it could be either for ego or for political short-term benefits, where everybody or every state wants to justify what it's doing and to show that it's the one with the solution. But at the end of the day, nobody has the solution, and we're not able to put our resources together, because you can imagine if all the states pool resources together and
I mean, we will be unstoppable, frankly, if we can just get our leadership right. The potpourri of issues that so far you both have highlighted, at the heart of it, to my understanding, is governance and economic aspects, and that's what is fueling this mostly. But there is a part to this that I think something can be done. Luqman, in terms of intelligence sharing and what that means, not just on one region, but across board, is there a better way that this can function pending when we can get our political act and diplomacy together?
In terms of intelligence sharing, there is not any operation against a terrorist group and other militant group that can be successful without sharing of timely and accurate intelligence. Now, if you look at these countries that are bearing the growth of the kidnapping, they are under military regime. And that's to tell you that by all intents and purposes, military regime is an aberration. So why I feel ECOWAS should not approach the issue from the angle of these three states are not democratic states, or the leadership are not democratically elected leaders. We are talking about the security of lives and properties. The ECOWAS, let me cite an example. Last year, General Christopher Musa, the current Minister of Defense, under his leadership as the Chief of Defense Staff, hosted a summit that brought all the African Chief of Defense Staff to Nigeria, African Chief of Defense Summit. These three countries that are actually facing endemic insecurity issues were grossly absent. So after the summit, what I expect is that ECOWAS should think beyond. These countries are not democratically elected, they are not constitutional democracy. The ECOWAS should see beyond that and actually send a delegate and reach out to them, either on the platform of ECOWAS or on the platform of African Union. That the summit that was set up in Nigeria was actually to see how we can bring about an improved coordination and other security framework within the African continent. And so countries were missing. Why? If ECOWAS have done that and reach out to them, I think these three countries that isolated themselves and get themselves withdrawn from ECOWAS, they will be able to think out of the box and say, no, this is beyond politics. This is beyond the improvement in the security of life and property of our people. So I strongly believe that if ECOWAS had done that, that will go a long way towards actually fostering security coordination and intelligence sharing. Because for this to actually be nipped in the bud, there's need for accurate and timely intelligence sharing amongst these countries across the Sahel region. So I'm still calling on ECOWAS and the African Union to actually not see this issue as a purely political. It is about humanity, the improvement in the security of life and property of the people at the Sahel. Because if you look at it critically, these countries are lacking the capacity, the technical know-how to actually be able to curb the menace of kidnapping and other security issue that is plaguing the Sahel states.
There's something, it's really about our collective humanity. Sometimes, when you see what is happening, you tend to worry that perhaps these people are a bit insulated from the reality on the ground of the ordinary man with this kidnapping for ransom and what goes on. Musa, let's see if we can do forward thinking in face of all the challenges that surround us. What would be a long-term strategy? I'll mention a couple and then maybe you add to it. Beyond force, improving community policing, which of them would be the most ideal to start? Economic opportunities or international cooperation? Which of them holds the greatest promise for addressing the root cause of kidnapping, and where do we start?
So there is, first of all, we have to know that there is no, is it silver bullet, or is it that one measure that has to be taken that will solve all the problems? So it's a combination of all. And if you could say maybe what is prioritization, which one do you start first with, and so on and so forth. The first, for example, is in terms of the exerting capacity. The state has to show its capacity and ability to protect physical, because security, more than anything else, is perception. If people feel secure, then there's a limit, or there's to the extent to which they can even stand their ground against something, and so on and so forth. So even when we talk about community policing, there must be some level of safety and security that the community feels, and empowerment that the community feels that it will be able to even, protect itself. So And that comes not in a vacuum. It comes with the presence of the state for people, because it starts with pilot, then you can expand and so on and so forth. When people feel safe, when people feel that they can, for example, work and collaborate with the government without any repercussion from the adversary, that's either the kidnappers and so on and so forth, then more and more the confidence grows and they are able to stand their ground. But in a situation whereby you have communities that know people that do the kidnapping actually, but however, they are afraid of coming up or coming ahead to volunteer information, because when they do that, and they have seen with their neighbors that they are left to their own devices, or they are left to their own means, then nobody comes forward. Nobody, and then the kidnappers or the bad guys continue to take these people one after the other.
Yeah, Musa, if I may just ask you to hold on for a bit, let's just quickly wrap up with Luqman in Abuja, and then we'll come back to you. For us here in Nigeria, the reality, I know it's dark in other places, but it is a daily reminder of the capability, the continuing capability of these people who engage in kidnapping for ransom. From your vantage point, what little advice would be the takeaway for anyone watching this program, for schools, for markets, for farming activities? How can they adapt to the risk of kidnapping?
Okay, looking at it from the Nigerian experience, if you witness the incident that occurred in Nigeria last year, towards the tail end of the year, there were kidnapping and abduction of school students. Farmers could not go to the farm, and it affects all facets of life in Nigeria. So in as much as we understand the fact that security is purely the reason why the government is in existence, but there's need for the citizens, the people at the local level, to also be able to provide security agencies with accurate and timely intelligence. When you see something, you say something. Regardless of the fact that who is involved in criminality, be it your family member, your friends, your associates, and your cronies, you should be able, without hesitation, to report these issues to all available security agencies within the general area at which this criminality is being perpetrated.
All right, Luqman, thank you very much for speaking with us in Abuja. We appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, Musa, in 30 seconds, if you can, your final thoughts on the subject.
So my final thoughts are that the state must exert itself and ensure that kidnapping is, there are consequences for those that engage in this act of kidnapping, because we're in a situation whereby communities are harassed, people are kidnapped, and ransom are paid, and there is no repercussion. Then the cycle returns itself, or we're in a vicious cycle. It encourages others to get into the trade because there are no consequences, and it kind of stifles communities' ability to organize and resist. Okay. Because the question is, the last community that tried to resist, what happens to them? Until there is that confidence that the state will step in, the state is going to do what is required to do. We're going to continue to have these incidences of kidnappings.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time and the insights you've provided.
Thank you for having me.